sort of flying Titanic mass quick reading from several years, for the last several years, some extracts, some Chi roots, and other miscellaneous. And remember, just because for you people who may be semi-virgins, just because it's funny doesn't mean it's a joke. Just because it's serious doesn't mean it's silly. And vice versa. And cute. I'm going to pick up a few things from the last time we were taping. There is a kind of quite simple that you probably read about back in your younger days at a very specific, very common material level. There are conditions under which cells split and only one of the dualistic outcome of the division can grow. And it's just simply referred to as, is observed as, the part that has the nucleus, because sometimes under certain conditions there can be a cellular division and one of the divided parts will have no nucleus. It can live for a while, but it cannot grow. Right? Everybody remembers that. All right. I'll have to say that this is somewhat elusive, but there is a most common, everyday, and useful reflection of that inside your own nervous system up at this end, in areas that of course on the surface do not appear to be all that materialistic, but they are. It is inside the cellular structure of your own thoughts, wherein if a thought is going to persevere, if it is going to live, as we've already noted, it will divide very soon. It will divide. And what you have, within the case not of ordinary people, because then it's of no consequence, they're going to do what they have to do. But in the attempt to explore, to push the frontiers of your own brain, you have got to consider this and be aware of it. That once an idea splits, that is, it's alive and it divides, there is a specific corollary wherein one part of the division has, as it were, for my purposes, a nucleus. It is the more complex part of this division. It is that part that you have got to pursue. This is not the case with ordinary people, by any means, but you cannot pursue the more simplistic part. What it amounts to, for the sake... I see too many blank faces. Wait a second. Every thought you have, every idea you've ever had, if it did survive, whether it's been 20 or 30 years that you continue to rethink it, whether it was just long enough that it seemed to go into something else, the thought, if it did grow, that is, it did expand beyond what would amount to cut up into a minute section, would be a lineal, non-progressive thought that would be forgotten. If it went past that point, then it did divide. Now, it would normally be seen as you began to have a second thoughts about the idea, or the thought begins to apparently bring up possible opposition to the theory or the thought that you didn't consider when you first had the thought. All of this is a cruder reflection of what I pointed out to you, that everything alive divides. It has got to divide to live. It has got to divide to grow, which is all life is. Inside of a person individually, when your thought survives, it has divided. And it divided into what amounts to a part with a nucleus and a part without a nucleus. What amounts to it divides into a part that is simple, vis-a-vis the division, and a part that is more complex. You cannot pursue. That is, you cannot continue to think. You can't go, wait a minute, and go after the simple part, the part with no nucleus, because it can live for a while, but it cannot grow, and it certainly can never reproduce. You're done with it. If you pursue it, what you're going to end up with, in a sense, is leftovers. You cannot pursue the part that has no new territory nucleus. It is not going anywhere. It will never again divide. It cannot reproduce. It cannot grow. Now, although I said that this was an illusion, metaphorical, it's nonetheless a fact. That is why ordinary knowledge seems to always come to a dead end. No matter how great it is that you've thought something at the ordinary old world intelligence level. And everybody's thought they thought something great. Even bricklayers one time in their life thought they thought something great, like one time they was good and drunk and thought, I'm going to quit this job. God, what a... They took it as a moment of revelation. They felt at one with the great unionized Buddhahood. It never goes any further. If they do, for some reason, try to go back and restart the engine, try to get it back on track, it's as though whatever the nourishment was, whatever the payoff was originally is gone. It is the pursuit. It is being dragged at the ordinary level, of course. It's not an active part of the participant or the person within whom this is taking place. They are dragged most often by the common part, the simple part, the part with no nucleus. Not always, but it does not do an individual any good when it simply happens, because you've got to have this melange, you've got to have this combination that many people are having a certain thought. It could apparently be political. Let us say that right now in our day and time that many people are beginning to reconsider the position of being a stalwart Democrat just because their family's been a Democrat and just because they're from the part of the country that's always been a Democrat or anything. I'm just using an example. And so many people now who were Democrats from Democratic families, from a history of Democratic party participation, many of them now that they've got a little education, a few bucks in their pocket, and moving up in the tax bracket, are beginning to rethink their position and perhaps decide that being a Republican is not a sure, direct route to Hades. So let us say that there are handfuls of people thinking this similar thought. Some of them, the thought splits up, and to pursue, all right, I will become a Republican, may be the part that in effect has a nucleus. But in others that start off having the same kind of thought, that is, perhaps I should consider changing my party allegiance, then some of them will think about it and go, nah. So the part of pursuing the idea, the possibility of being a Republican, had no nucleus. So you have people who apparently are lined up in some given instance, and the drum major says, here we go, and they all step off on their right foot, and then the next step, though, some of them go to the left, some go to the right. You can start off and have the division and apparently be in line with other people around you. You could be holding some thought that is very common to your time and place. But then, it is not that the thought itself, the idea, the possibility, is going to divide, and it intrinsically, that one of the parts has a nucleus and one does not. It will vary from person to person. That is what gives the needed friction. That is what churns things up. And so some people are going to be dragged one way of the more simplistic part, and other people are going to be dragged with what seems to be the more complex part. Put it all together, and it has the necessary resistance, it has the necessary attempted movement to create evolution, to make the system expand and become more complex. Individually, for somebody attempting to do this, there is just simply a flat rule. You've got to understand that no matter what you think, no matter what happens to you, at least back in the old areas, no matter what information, no matter what new ideas that you may seem to have, or you may have seemed to have read it or gotten it from somebody else, but you think, that is worthwhile, I like that, that is very meaningful, and is probably will prove to be quite practical. Unless you forget it, unless that was it, and you went, wow, how great, and then you went off and you never thought again, which is one possibility. That is, if it is going to have a life, then it is going to divide soon. When it divides, there's going to be one part that is more simplistic, and there's going to be one part that is more complex, that can reproduce itself, that can grow. In all cases, it is your responsibility to pursue the latter part. You cannot go by that which is necessary in the city under ordinary conditions, that some people have got to apparently pursue the simplistic part, the part with no nucleus. But you cannot do that. Why would you? How can you allow yourself to do that? There was a possible chi root type that I never did right. I never did let chi root right. And here's a good place to finally pull it out. Could I have B flat? It goes like this. You can learn no lessons from the defeated if there are no survivors. Now I could have let chi root use that. Maybe I'd come back, say something one day, or maybe some of you see it can divide up several ways. If you actually listened to it and you thought, well, I did it for some reason, or if it just struck you, then immediately if it strikes you, it divides itself already. It can either mean this or it can mean that. And if you go with one of them, and you go with the one that is more complex, then even it will divide. And well, it goes this way. But leaving that more complex sidestep to you, I could have done that and say that, at least tacitly I'm insinuating that if you're not wasting your time here, that it represents something along the very lines that this is involved with, and that I am suggesting that you could consider it, to let it split up and you pursue it in a more complex manner within yourself. But since I did not do that, I'm going to take it apart for you. Remember, it goes, you can learn no lessons from the defeated if there are no survivors. You got it? But now wait a minute. The way that I can safely predict, since I'm the one conjuring up the rules and the game, that at least 51% of you would have gone in a certain direction with it if it struck you enough that it did take hold long enough to divide. And so it's to you I'm saying, hey, wait a minute. In other words, you cannot learn from a conflict somewhere. And for you people watching this for the first time, perhaps on tapes at other times in other places, this has nothing to do with a person. We're talking about stuff out there. You know, beating up people and being in wars and conquering other people. It's either that or the other way around. I can't remember. That you cannot learn from those that you've defeated. Remember, this means people. It doesn't mean ideas or things you overcame. It means, people. Oh, rotten people, right? That you cannot learn from things you've overcome if nobody survives in it. That if you ended up in a sense of executing a scorched earth policy toward the poor people and you didn't let anybody survive, then you couldn't go back and learn anything from those that have been defeated by you. But now wait. That's where we were, remember? But wait. As good as that may sound to some who would have let it split up in the ways that I have already mentioned, let me point out that a real revolutionist, even a real explorer, shouldn't get so distracted from the continuing need to make military strategic decisions. He can't let himself get distracted by sitting around in conversation with the vanquished. All right. Why would someone with any real intelligence enter into conversation with a new idea that he just heard of that says, perhaps, good basis for it, looks as though it might be a continuing piece of information he could use that's in a prestigious journal, or it's quoted perhaps in National Enquirer from a prestigious journal, and it says that the consumption of alcohol is not nearly as detrimental as once believed, and you enter that conversation while in the midst of just having decided that you were going to give up drinking. Why would a potentially real person, somebody of any new intelligence, why would they do that? If that didn't help, let me be a little more blunt. What could a truly intellectual, a more complex person learn from a loser? From failures? Who cares whether they're survivors from a conflict? What the hell are you going to talk to them about? They're going to tell you how they lost? They're simpletons, or they wouldn't have lost. Have you already forgotten one of the rules? The simple are always consumed by the complex. There's no way out of that. Life does allow the ordinary back at the old level ways to squirm around with it as part of the purpose of religion. Mythological tales. But all you got to do is have some eyesight in a new territory, and you see in you see in everyone else, you see in everything else, that the simple, and whatever it is, in the relationship, the relativity of it, the simple is always consumed, that is, always defeated. They are eaten up by the more complex. I don't care if we're talking about people, ideas, feelings, institutions, movements, history, time, direction. That's the way it is. If it were not true, things would be in a process of devolution, which I don't even have to tell you people it's not anymore, do I? Because if you think there's any possibility, if you even stop and think, well, is it? You know, get the hell out. Not up here, but get out of you. Well, get out of here. It's not in a process of involution, but that's what would happen if the simplistic can defeat the more complex. If that is possible, then we would have a different situation about, wait, we need survivors so we can learn. But since that's not the case, do you understand why I could twist around my proposed or possible route of how can you learn from the conquered if there are no survivors? Like, take it easy. Let some of them survive. We'll take a few prisoners because we'll learn something. What? You're going to decide to do something and then say, well, wait a minute, I think I'll discuss it with myself. What if I don't do any more dope? Are you going to be able to take it? Who are you talking to? What part of you are you going to talk to that's got anything worthwhile to say? Yeah. You can say, well, you poor little thing. Now, I've decided that I'm going to cut out I'm not going to smoke, I'm not going to do more drugs at all. And there's a survivor there. And you think, well, maybe I could talk. About what? Whoever you've got to converse with in you is going to be a division with no nucleus, or it would not have been defeated. Now, the defeat does not have to be a fait accompli. It is, as I started out, for some of you look so blank, let us say that it's just in the midst that you've decided, I'm going to give up all narcotics, all drugs. And right in the midst of that, or drinking. And right there, here's an article that says, been going on at the University of California or somewhere, and it says that within certain fairly reasonable limits, a lifelong habit of consumption of alcohol does not pose the general health threat so long proclaimed by the medical profession. And here it is that you are in the midst of. Don't worry whether you succeeded, but you're in the midst that you've made this decision that, yeah, I'm going to quit drinking. And here it is, the conversation is possible. You've got a survivor. You understand? The survivor seemed to be outside of you, but there was a survivor in you that looked at that and went, wait a minute, we should read this. We should read this. Why? What's it going to tell you? If you thought that was too strong, what are you going to talk to yourself about once you've decided to do anything? The only thing you're going to be able to talk about is you're going to talk about that which is going to attempt, that which hopes to survive what you're going to do. That is, well, I'm not going to drink anymore. And there's a part of your molecular structure goes, in essence, it's saying, you know, maybe, I've heard this before, Or even if it's never heard it before. If you've never tried it before, it's kind of going... What it's saying is there's a possibility that this decision will be undecided later, that this will come unraveled. And ordinary people take that into consideration, do they not? It's a form of self-analysis. It's a form of your own ordinary dialogue of, well, let's see, wait a minute. It passes under guises such as, well, I should think about this. I should ponder it. Perhaps I even discuss it with others, but if I don't, at least, I should consider within myself exactly what I'm doing. Who are you listening to? You're listening to a survivor. If you press on what you're going to do, you're listening to that, a voice from that which you're attempting to conquer. You're listening to a voice in you that represents that which is more simplistic, or you would not be trying to change it. It doesn't matter whether it's alcohol or whatever it is. It doesn't even matter. You are listening to, in advance, the defeated. You're listening to that which knows that it will be defeated if you carry on with a more complex decision. If you pursue the side that you started out speaking for, the side with a nucleus, and you're saying, well, I'm going to consume the other part. I'm going to defeat it. And it says, well, and you say, well, what do you mean by that? There you are discussing it. To what end? To what possible end are you going to discuss anything with a loser, with a failure, with a simpleton? You are pursuing a division. So you had a division. Whatever it is, you've been doing X. Now you say, I'm going to stop doing X. It's divided. The stop doing X is more complex. Whatever it is, it's the side with a nucleus. You're going to pursue the other side that says, well, wait a minute. Maybe it's not as bad as we thought. Or perhaps we don't have to do it right now. Perhaps we can do it later. Maybe we should read more about it. Maybe we should think more about it. How can you call yourself intelligent to carry on a conversation with a simpleton, even though it's within you? That with no nucleus, that which will never generate any growth, it will not create any new, more complex ability, decision-making ability. It will produce no new information. Why are you going to even discuss it? Because to discuss it is to be dragged by it. You're pursuing it. You're going out into the field or now down into the dungeons with a few survivors, and you're going to talk to them on the basis that it can, on the surface, verbally sound like, well, that is an intelligent thing to go talk to some of the prisoners, some of the survivors, because you can find out how they lost the skirmish, how they lost the war. Even though you won, you can go there and find out what they did, and it'll be good ammunition, be good information to have for your next battle. That sounds fine until you think about it a second. Why in the world do you want to go talk to somebody you defeated? What are they going to tell you? Now at the ordinary level, it can apparently make all the sense in the world. But remember, at the ordinary level, at least half the people, every time a division is made in a structure, an institution, or a thought, approximately half the people are going to follow the part with no nucleus. They're going to serve as being opposition. They're going to serve as being their dead resistance to what life's attempting to do in this growth, or else it would not have divided this thing, this idea, this institution, this movement. And you're going to pursue. You're going down the dungeons and talk to those who are going to die. You don't have to kill them. They're going to die. They've got no nucleus. They cannot reproduce. But at the city, it sounds fine. Those of you who hadn't noticed, this is simply my version. This is a greater reflection of the good old thing that they love to sing in the city about, well, live and learn. Right. Right-o. Or, well, it was hard, but at least a man can learn from his mistakes. Learn what? But it seems obvious. Well, learn not to do it again. Oh. If you could have learned that, it's not been that long ago that some of you, you get a glimpse of that one night. If you could learn from your mistakes, if you had that potential, You've got to be able to get into the 4D area of your nervous system, and right quick I'm going to say it, and you can either see it or you can't. If you could really had the possibility of learning from your mistakes, you wouldn't have made the mistake. It is not mathematically, it is not topographically possible that if indeed you could actually learn from what is called mistakes, that's not my word, they use that word, but if you could have learned from that which has happened that seems to have to you a negative energy payout, that is, it was a mistake, it was a step backwards, it drained you. If you could have learned from that after it's over, but oh, now I see, if you had that potential, you would not have done it to start with. There is no way, unless you stay with the 3D words and music, that you would have anything to discuss with that which you expect to defeat, that which you could conquer. There is nothing to discuss with it. It is part of the process, another reflection of me pointing out you should not ever tell yourself what you're doing. Why? The part that you could tell is the part that's going to resist it. It's the part that has no soul, it has no nucleus, it is a simpleton, or else you would not be trying to escape from it. You would not be trying to change it, whatever it is. And why are you going to talk to it? Why are you going to entertain anything? Why are you going to hear it just even way down there in the dungeons or wherever it goes, help, help, or psst, psst. You know, psst, hell, what the hell are you psting their way for? I know who you are. What are you going to tell me? Come down a little closer. Come down here. There's no need for me to come down there. You can almost see this also, we're out of tape, as a kind of revolutionary judicial system with no route of appeal. There's one judgment. There's good old conservatives, now I like to think in the city. No route, no form of appeal. There's one judgment. That is, one decision's made, and baby, that's it. That is no survivors. No survivors. No way to appeal it. Because that's what the survivor's doing by saying, hey, did you see that new article that says drinking or blank may not be what we thought? Or, psst, come here, come here. I'm wounded, but I may be able to live. I could help you later. It's an appellate court. One judgment, because the division gets made, and there it is. You have got one part, has a nucleus, has the ability to survive, to replicate itself, to be more complex, and a side that does not. It amounts to being sterile. It serves a purpose. At any given time, half the population is pursuing that one, or within a single individual, half the time they're pursuing the divisions in their own thoughts that are sterile, that are going nowhere. Do not even converse with them. Do not entertain the possibility of conversing with them. If you're going to make a decision, if you're going to execute a decision, they're already defeated. That's the basis on which you have to operate. Because if you do not give in, if you do not tolerate them saying, psst, if you do not tolerate the old idea that I could learn from the more simple part of me, that in some way I can learn from the stupidity within myself. Unless you're still that stupid, consider there are no survivors. Never. Because if there's a survivor, that son of a bitch will file an appeal. You can count on it. And don't blame attorneys, blame life. Because anybody that survives is going to beg for mercy. They'll file an appeal. They'll say, please don't do this. I'll help you. They'll do anything. But the point is, it is a process of appeal. There should be no survivors. If there is a survivor, you didn't do it right. We're out of tape. This can survive no longer. Another possible name, since this doesn't have a name, another possible name, and this one is, it's all still in flux. And I had a thought for the night for you. And the thought for the night is this. It's a more complex one than I've been using. The thought for the night is this. Who's there? You know damn well who.